Okay, at this point we're ready to take the glued plastic piece, the shell covering, and apply it to the shell. This is the riskiest part because if you don't glue it exactly correct, once you stick it, it's really virtually impossible to take off without using like maybe a heat gun and some adhesive remover and stuff I don't want to try to do. So what I've done is I've actually made a template out of some poster board that I stick up next to the drum. The reason I do this is to give the tiniest bit of a gap between this material and the drum edge, because it's really hard to feather the edge of this plastic. It takes a lot of work and a lot of time. So if I can space it a little bit so I don't have to do that, then that just makes it easier for me. So I'm going to move the material right over here close, but not too close. This is a two-person job. Also, the shell is sitting on wax paper right now, and that's to keep it from sticking where I've glued it. So what we're going to do is we're going to pick this piece of plastic up, and where my mark is right here, I'm going to line it exactly with the center of here, and I'm going to use my J roller, which is it's made by Marshalltown, made in USA, and we're going to start making the adhesive stick between the two pieces, and I'll work my way around. Now in some videos you may have seen where a person, once they get it to start, they'll take the shell and roll it back and forth. I haven't really had much success with that. It seems to work okay, but usually I end up with kind of a seam problem. So I'm going to try it this way for today. Okay, so now we're going to stick this. So I got to be careful not to let it touch. Don't even let it touch. Just kind of get it sort of wrapped around. You need two people, and you kind of want to move it up really slowly as you're lining it up. Really slowly. Okay, I have the first part lined up, and so what I'm going to do is see if the bottom lines up, and it does. And I'm going to start using my J roller to start rolling this around this way. I'm just going very lightly right now to try to make sure no bubbles or anything are in there. But again, just going very lightly, working slowly. And if I've done this correctly, it should line up on the seam, and over here it lines up exactly. So now I'm going to start working the other direction. Looks like I might be off a little bit in that direction. I may end up having to do some feathering. So I'm going to have to lift this up a little bit. That's okay though, won't hurt anything. I'm going to have to rotate this around slightly. And continue to use my J roller to bring this around. And if everything worked out right, I should be about even on the seam, and as you can see, it is. So both seams are even. So now what I want to do is I want to actually put this on a carpeted surface, and I'm going to roll it starting from where the beginning of it was in each direction, and that's going to force the adhesive to stick to the both surfaces, so it makes a good adhesion. Now, as we can see, it looks pretty good here. Sticks out a little bit there. Yeah, my seam actually came down this way a little bit, but it's not too bad. I'm covered on both sides. I'll be able to take an X-Acto knife, cut this off, and then I'll be able to take a file and clean it up, and I'll show you how to do that next. The main thing is I want to make sure this is stuck down, so I'm going to go get my J-roller again. And I really want to go on this seam to make sure it's stuck down real well. I see a little bit of my blue tape is sticking underneath it, so I have to pull that out very carefully. I'll do that, and then I'll re-stick it. So it's off just slightly, not too bad. I don't think there's any such thing as a perfect job on this. Maybe if you had a machine to do it. So I'm pulling my tape off. I may have to get my X-Acto knife. Yep. So I'm going to get my X-Acto knife and cut along here so that it doesn't pull the glue out of the seam. So I'll do that next. Okay, so I want to remove this tape along this seam while the glue is still within the 4-hour period. And if I start just pulling it, it'll tend to pull it out of the seam between the two pieces. So what I do is I barely press down with an X-Acto knife to cut the glue. You don't want to be cutting through the plastic or anything. You just want to be right there on that seam, trying to get this tape off and not pulling the glue out. And there will be a little bit of residual glue. We're going to remove that by just simply, you can just simply rub on it and it'll come off and it'll look great. So I'm going to continue with this. And at this point, what I do is while the glue is still setting, or whatever you want to call it, I take this piece of plastic, fold it over, close up that seam, and I'll end up rolling this one more time, but I'm not going to do that for this very second. Now this one has some of the tape under the seam, so I got to try to carefully remove it. Also, at this point, I wanted to mention all the tape you put on the inside. You're going to want to take that off. Let me remove this piece first. This is just the piece that holds the goes over that plastic. You're going to remove all the tape on the inside because this painter's masking tape, it starts to stick pretty good after a few days. So you don't want to leave it in there too long. So I'm just going to try to work this out a little bit at a time. See what I can do here. You can always come back and re-glue the seam if you need to, but I don't think you will. This should all just come out real nice. I put the shell wrapping on and I let it cure overnight. So now I'm ready to start to trim this excess plastic along the bearing edge. And to do that, I prefer to use an X-Acto type knife, but in this case I use Olfa, which is made in Japan. They come in packages like this. You can buy them on Amazon. They have little blade packs of different kinds of blades. and I use their blades because their blades are extremely sharp compared to the ones I found with X-Acto, which are good blades. But these are even sharper. So what you want to do is, using the bearing edge as a guide, you want to just very lightly go along here where you're going to cut. And I usually stop at a certain point and cut it down. Then I'll go back, and each time I'm not pressing very hard, I'm just pushing very lightly, and I'm going to keep doing this, and it'll finally break through. It'll make a nice clean cut. And I'll do that for both sides of the drum. So we'll continue here and show you how it breaks through here. I would expect it to any second now. You just have to be patient and keep working it. There we go. Okay, it is cutting. I was starting to get worried there because this blade, I've used it a few times, so it might not be as sharp as I need. So here I am kind of cutting it. Take some off. And I don't care if a little bit is here, because I'm going to take a file and feather this out from the other side. I just really want to get off any excess. And I want to try not to push this into the wood, into the bearing edge, because it'll damage the bearing edge. So just be patient, take your time. So that's what you're going to do for the whole drum. Now some of it's not up to the bearing edge, that's totally okay. The drum head's going to come over and cover that. When we did this, we just wanted to make sure we were close to the edge. I wanted to go back and mention why I put blue tape along here when I'm closing the seam gap. That's because if you have this blue tape on here and you have the glue on the other side, which is underneath here, and you pull the blue tape up before you close the seam, it'll often pull all this glue right off, because even though the glue has started to cure, it isn't sticking enough to the surface below. Even though you've sanded it and made it rough, it'll just tend to pull all off and create a mess, and you have to kind of start over again on that particular area. Now what you could do is you could take an X-Acto knife and cut along the blue tape so that it breaks the glue that's underneath it, and then peel it off and then close the seam. That'd be an alternative strategy that might work better. Once you have the seam closed, I also wanted to show you that it's going to leave a little bit of glue, and you can just take your fingers and rub that glue out. It's just like almost like rubber cement. It makes little balls of rubber. So you can do that for that whole seam, and it'll look really good when you're finished. And remember, there's going to be lugs here and here, so it's going to look really nice. So you just want to go through it like this, get all that glue out. Almost all of it's gone right now just by doing that little bit right there. And that's all you have to do to make that seam look really nice. So I'm going to close that back up, recover this. I always want to keep my protective layer on till I'm ready to drill. So again, what I'm going to do is I'm going to finish trimming all this plastic, and then I'm going to show you how to feather it, and then I'm going to show you how to do a finishing sanding along the bearing edge to make it nice and smooth, and we'll do that next.